Okay, so in the last classes, we had looked at the dihybrid cross, and I had even asked you to do two of these crosses, especially these any of those taking any of the traits, homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive, and so on, and then calculate the genotype and phenotype ratio. Genotype again not feasible as such, but still the phenotype surely can be calculated and check what are the ratio of those particular phenotype. So I hope everyone has done. I haven't checked it yet, those assignments. So I will go over it maybe today or tomorrow. Then fork line method, we just had a quick overview. When you have a tri-hybrid cross and so on, in that case it is more useful because like you can easily figure out what are the phenotypes based on the genotype. So in this case, like if you remember, this was let's say for example small aa, capital BB, and the capital C. So this could be one. Then small a, capital B, and capital C, small c. So this could be the second individual and so on. So that way, this was relatively easier method as well. So that was fork line, and then we had looked at the different laws that those were created after the Mendel's work. That were these three specifically: law of dominance, which says only one character is expressed, that is dominant, and one which is not expressed is recessive. Law of segregation or purity of gamete, it says one particular gamete will only carry one particular factor, which is one particular allele, right, or one particular gene. And for example, if heterozygous parent is there, that is heterozygous for, let's say, flower color, and it carries both the gene, that is purple color as well as white color gene with the Pisum sativum plant, then when during the gamete formation, each of the gamete can have only one of them. Both, that is white color gene and purple color gene, will never be present on the same gamete. They will always be present on different gametes. So it can be either white color gene or can be purple color gene. So that is the law of segregation, or it's also called as purity of gametes. And the third one was law of independent assortment. This is specifically applicable to dihybrid cross. Whenever we cross two pairs of character, the distribution of allele of one character is independent of the distribution of allele of other character. So that means in this case, especially when you have this F1 generation, the distribution of allele, that is whether capital Y or small y, goes to the individual, is independent of capital R or small r, or other way also, like which of the gamete will have capital R or small r. This will be totally independent of this capital Y and small y. So that is one particular trait during gamete formation, they separate into their alleles, and that particular part is totally independent of the other character. Yeah, so that is what the law of independent assortment speaks about. So that's what we had done so far. Now we'll move forward with the chromosomal theory of inheritance. Now from here onwards, the part becomes somehow a little theoretical, and also in terms of you will find so many interesting phenomena like codominance and incomplete dominance and so on, which we'll see further. So there were these two gentlemen, Walter Sutton and the Theodore Boveri, around 1900. Again, that was after the period of Mendel finished his study, and he was dead also in 1886. So after that, they described the parallelism between the segregation of chromosome. Now, this parallelism has like a kind of, the meaning of this word refers to there is some similarity while the segregation of chromosome happens during the meiosis, and the behavior of genes during the transmission of a hereditary character. and this is specifically referring to the gametogenesis process. So ultimately, they described a situation of the chromosome, how chromosome is segregated during meiosis, that is, and how chromosomes rather, or how sorry, my bad. So how chromosomes are getting separated during meiosis, and along with these chromosomes, how genes are also getting separated during gamete formation process. So this particular correlation was established by these two guys, and their certain facts that they took into consideration were both the chromosomes and the genes, they are found in pairs in diploid cell. That we already know, when we have diploid cell, that is two sets of chromosomes, they will have both the chromosomes and both the genes. Again, for example, chromosome number 1 from father, chromosome number 1 from mother. So there will be two sets of chromosome, and also for each particular character, let's say skin color, there will be one gene from mother and one gene from father. So that this fact they knew already. Then the homologous chromosomes separate and the gene pairs segregate during meiosis. Now homologous chromosomes separate as in when the sister chromatids, they are patched together, and the homologous chromosomes, they pair up during the prophase 1 in meiosis first part. During prophase 1, when homologous chromosomes, they form a pair, they separate, and the gene pair will also separate accordingly. It's quite obvious, like genes are located in those chromosomes, and if the chromosomes are separating, obviously the genes are also getting separate. Third point that they consider before suggesting a theory was the paired condition of both genes and the chromosomes is restored by fertilization. In gamete formation, they become single, that is single set of chromosome and single gene with that particular set of chromosome. But after fertilization, this they again reunite to form a diploid state. Again, genes will have two copies for one particular character, and chromosomes will also have two copies. The gametes have only one set of both genes and chromosome. Again, the same thing, it just said in different ways. The gametes, that is whatever anthers or the stigma or rather ovules are there, they have only one set of both genes. So they can either have a particular character, or they can have the contrasting character as well. And this is true with the chromosomes as well. So the gametes, they can have only one set, and the gametes constitute the bridge between successive generation. Like whenever there is a gamete formation, they are obviously passing down the genes, so that's why it is called as they constitute a bridge between successive generation. So these were the few facts that these people took into consideration before they put forward this chromosomal theory of inheritance. And this was proposed in 1902, and it was actually done independently. That means Boveri proposed it separately, and this certain guy, he proposed it separately, and then it was merged later as one single theory. So the theory says the somatic cell, that is the regular cell of an organism which develops from zygote, they are all diploid. Again, nothing to explain. Obviously, we know that they have two sets of chromosomes, so they are diploid. Each diploid set. Now, one fact I must mention here before going to second point is, because we already know certain facts, we might find that, oh, these are all redundant. What is new thing in this chromosomal theory of inheritance? But we know it because we have read and studied about it. This is this theory is talking about how it came forward, or how it is in terms of historical events, like how it was formulated into this particular like proof points. So that is what this is. So most of the points we would already know. So the second point is, each diploid cell will contain two set of chromosomes. One is from the mother and the other one is from the father, that is coming through ovum and the sperm. The two chromosomes of one type will constitute the homologous chromosomes pair, right? That means chromosome number 1 from father and 1 from mother, they will constitute, they are of one type, and they will constitute the homologous chromosome pair. The chromosomes retain their structural uniqueness. This is another important fact with respect to the physical characteristics. So the chromosomes, they will retain their structural uniqueness, individuality, and continuity throughout the life cycle of an organism. It does not happen at all that once the gene is passed from father to the son, or from mother to the son, or either ways, even to the daughter, the chromosomes which are being passed in their gametes, that is sperm and ova, they will maintain their structural uniqueness. So for example, if chromosome 1 looks like in a certain shape or certain structure, that will be maintained throughout that generation. And also the individuality, that means the number of genes present on that particular gene, that is the individuality of the gene, that will also be maintained. And the continuity, that is ability of being passed down across generation, that is the structural uniqueness, individuality, and continuity of the chromosome is retained throughout the life cycle of an organism. And each chromosome carries specific determiner or Mendelian factors, now called as genes, and they play significant role in the development of the organism from zygote. Again, until 1902, they were still called as Mendelian factors or unit factors or specific determiners. Later on, it was termed as genes, which we already know. So that is the basis of the chromosomal theory. And two more points that they had also mentioned is genes are located in the chromosomes in the linear order. Now, linear order refers to there is one gene, then there may be some gap or may not be some gap, but the next gene will be after it. It cannot have any branches. That's what it means. They are present in the linear order and not in a branched order. So the genes are located in chromosome in the linear order, that is one after another. And the behavior of chromosome during the meiosis at the time of gamete formation, it provides the evidence that the genes are located in chromosome. So this was the hypothesis that was put forward, not the hypothesis, this was the point that was put forward by these two guys in the chromosomal theory of inheritance. And because of this behavior of chromosome during meiosis, it also explains the mechanism of segregation and the independent assortment of the characteristics. So like I said, Mendel has done quite a lot of basic work. And based on his work, these laws were developed. And then these laws were checked for different parameters by the different people. And so this is what also this particular parameter, that is the behavior of chromosome during meiosis, it also explains the mechanism of segregation and independent assortment. Now, I'm sure you remember the meiosis process. The chromosomal segregation happens and the gamete formation happens then. So that explains the segregation law. And then based on the which characters are being passed down in which gamete, that is what is independent assortment of characteristics. So that is what was explained by this chromosomal theory of inheritance. These are nothing but a very factual points, which we already know, like I said earlier. But yeah, if you have any question in this, we can discuss about it. Anyone, even on this part, which is probably easy. Okay, so if there are no questions, then again, this is the difference between Mendelian factor and the chromosome behavior. I discuss about this parallelism, right? This terminology. So that parallelism is kind of briefed here. You can read it on your own. This is nothing different, but this we have already kind of discussed in this chromosomal theory and also in these points. So you can go over that particular part. This is there in your textbook as well. Okay. Now, how this theory, once it was put forward, how did it help in establishing this law statement, that is law of segregation, law of independent assortment, and so on. So the chromosomal explanation, that is the chromosomal theoretical theory, how is it helping in the explanation of law of segregation? So the segregation of these Mendelian factors or genes in terms of movement of chromosome during the meiosis was explained by this theory. That is the how the genes are segregating, how the chromosomes are segregating during meiosis, that is gamete formation, was explained by this theory, and also by Mendel, of course, which was based on the rather the theory was based on the Mendel's work. And at the time of gamete formation during meiosis, the homologous chromosomes of the pair synapse during early prophase 1. This we already know, that the homologous chromosome, they come together forming a pair and separate during the anaphase 1, producing two haploid daughter cells. Now this process explained is kind of meiosis in short. During prophase 1, homologous chromosomes forms a pair. During anaphase 1, they produce haploid daughter cell, that is a single set of chromosome, and during the second meiotic division they will multiply and they will form two new daughter cells. So that way you get 4 gametes or 4 daughter cells which have only one copy of the chromosomes, that is one copy of each particular gene character. Now this is what is explained in this particular diagram. So we already know there is G1, G2 and so on phases. So this is the interphase kind of shown. Then after interphase, it enters into the meiosis 1. That is the anaphase 1 of the meiosis 1. Now in this, they are kind of getting separated. They are being pulled apart. If you can see this, now this is a representation. This is not actual cell that they have drawn, but these things, these are the spindle fibers which are attached to the kinetochore structures at the chromosome, and then they are being pulled apart. And that way, what you get is the cells with, now they have not completely shown the haploid daughter cells, but ideally we should get those. And then after this, in the second meiosis, they are separated. So they have directly shown the duplication of the chromosome in the meiosis 2, and then individually they are separating into gametes. So let's say at this stage, there was one copy of the gene on the upper yellow and another copy of the same character gene on the lower yellow. So for example, skin color, which is on the upper yellow, and the skin color on the lower yellow. And if you look at the last product, upper yellow, for example, has only one copy of the skin color gene, and the other lower yellow will have the second copy of the gene. So that way, law of segregation was explained by these people to establish that, okay, the law of segregation is responsible for segregation of gametes and ultimately the segregation of chromosomes as well as the genes for one particular character.
Sir.
Yes.
So what it should be ideally is that first the yellow and the orange thing should divide and not copy themselves, right?
No, this is correct, no? So this is the interphase. So that is duplication has happened, right?
Yes.
After duplication, then they individually separate, right? Individually separate in the sense they will form haploid set of cells.
So, but then they'll have to form 4 cells directly.
Oh, correct. You are referring to that particular stage. Yes. In that case, yes, that's right.
So at first the yellow and the orange thing will divide and then they'll replicate themselves.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
But here, like, because they didn't want to show all these steps, probably they have merged few steps all together. But main thing is the genes, they are separating from these two chromosomes into the final gamete. That is the this law of segregation. Then the next law, that is law of independent assortment, how it was explained is again, yeah, I guess, can I directly go to the example? Yeah, I guess we can do that directly. Instead of going through this description, you can of course read it out, but let's try to do it here. So we already know the in dihybrid cross, two traits are being considered. In human being, it is always polyhybrid, because one gene or one particular chromosome carries many genes, and so ultimately many characters are being transferred from one particular gene. So that way it is polyhybrid. But let's take a simple example of dihybrid cross, where you have these individual, that is capital Y, capital R, and small r. Now, there will be two possibilities in the gamete formation when these are, crossed. Like this individual, when it will form the gamete, there are two possibilities. So, in this case, again, what are these characters referring to? That is yellow seed and green seed. Now, the color is pink and blue, and they are referring to this. But I guess this was the most appropriate diagram that I could find with respect to the traits being passed down. So capital Y is yellow seed, small y is green seed, capital R is round seed, and small r is wrinkled seed. It's the same dihybrid cross that we had seen earlier, but just specifically with respect to the gamete formation we are looking here. So when these will form gamete, now if you can see, there is capital Y and small y, capital R and small r. So the possibility of gamete is capital Y, small y, capital R, and small r, small r. In the other scenario, these individual, they will just flip the side. So that is capital Y is fusing with capital R here. In this case, capital Y is fusing with small r. So that is the difference in these two cases. Yeah, and then based on how they go forward, the gamete formation will be different, right? That is capital Y, capital R, these two will be of the same type. Small y, small r, again both of these will be same type. Capital Y, small r, these two are same type, and small y, capital R, these will be again of same type. So that way, if you look the gamete formation process through the meiosis from these individual which are F1 generation, yeah. Again, if I go back probably to that diagram, you can correlate it more. Yeah. So these were the individuals taken. You get capital Y, small y, capital R, small r. And that is what was shown in that particular diagram. And at the end, whatever gametes you get, they were exactly same. So you have both capital and both small, and one's Y small and one's R small. So if you go back now, like I'm deliberately using not non-biological terminologies, that is like capital and small here, because it's easier to understand. Now if you look here, both capital and both small, these are the two gametes. Then one's capital Y and one's capital R, or one small r and small y. So that way we get the same gametes, and how those gametes are being formed and how they separate the particular trait, that is the law of independent assortment, and that is totally independent of what is the other character. That means if it is capital Y, that is yellow seed, it can go either with round seed or it can also go with the wrinkled seed. So it can go with the round seed and it can also go with the wrinkled seed. Similarly, the green seeds, that is small y, same, it can again go with the wrinkled seed or it can go with the round seed. So this separation of yellow or green is independent of round and wrinkled, or the separation of round and wrinkled is independent of yellow or green seed color. So that is what is shown in this particular diagram, which is nothing but the gamete formation for the law of independent assortment. Okay, is this part clear to everyone? Or are there any questions? It's nothing but the same F1 hybrid that we had taken, heterozygous dihybrid cross, and then showing the gamete formation process. And they are just mentioning the stages of meiosis 1 and meiosis 2, that is the final gamete formation. Okay, so I assume this part is clear. Then the next part after this theory is, so there were law of dominance was anyway proved along the by Mendel himself, so there is no explanation by this theory. Yeah, that was already proven. Only these two laws, that is law of segregation and law of independent assortment, they were proven further by this chromosomal theory of inheritance. Then the biological importance of Mendelism. Now, in case of biological importance, let me just highlight these points which are missed. So that is like how the Mendelism is actually being used in the biological systems, right? So now first point, there is improvement of plant varieties and races. Now, if you remember the earlier discussions, we had already discussed this part to some extent. Right now, based on a particular hybridization or selection, these different breeds, they are used for crossing with each other, either to generate high yield of something, or kind of being resistance to some diseases, or being more prepared for the adverse climatic condition. So that those genes are being isolated, or those chromosomes are being taken into consideration, and then they are used for producing the better variety. So for example, let's say you have like groundnut planted in the farm, and then like half of the farm is kind of infected by some let's say like what we call pest. Yeah, and then half of the farm is not infected by the pest, though being in the same, not half as in not literally half of physically, but some plants of groundnut, they are infected, and some plants, they are not infected. Now what you will do in that case, you will take out these plants which are not infected, and you will allow them to grow further. You will take out their seeds and then put it next for next generation in the farm. And when they grow, ideally they should not have what you say the any kind of pest infection. If and if there is no infection, that means that is becoming a better variety in terms of resistance to disease, and you kind of discard the earlier one, and now there is a natural pollination happening. So you are not doing anything like artificial hybridization is not happening, but that is the natural selection. In artificial hybridization, what you do is, again you can take a same example, but deliberately you take pollens of the plants which are insect pest resistant, or they are surviving even in less amount of water, that is adverse climatic condition or whatever trait it is. You take pollens of that and you put it on the stigma of those which are already with better qualities, right? And then you do artificial hybridization. Obviously, then again the groundnut or whatever plant or crop that is, it will grow. You pick out the seeds, grow for the next generation, and then you check for those characteristics, whatever you had tried hybridization for. So that way, improvement in plant varieties and races can happen with this Mendelism studies. Similarly, in case of animal races, again this is very commonly done in sorry, specifically in case of game animals like horses or camels or all those kinds of animal, where you like physically good looking horse or physically good looking camel, they are being allowed to mate with a similar type of female, male and female, right? And then whatever offspring is generated, that is supposed to be of the improved characteristics. And this is not done just once. Obviously, these experiments, they are repeated for several generations just to get that pure breed, so that the dilution of these, like you remember, in case of Mendelian monohybrid cross, you get one homozygous. In F2 generation, you get homozygous dominant, you get homozygous recessive, and you get heterozygous, right? So what you want is homozygous dominant, provided all those dominant characters, they are good in terms of animal. So if you want that pure line, you have to keep allowing them to mate with each other, so that you get that pure breed. So that is the type of improvement that is done in animal races. And also these kind of hybridization, they are also done through artificial insemination. So in this case, they like most of these scientists or people, they literally collect the semen from the male counterpart of one particular animal, and then they artificially inseminate in the female genital tract of again the same organism, and this way they can improve the different animal race. So for example, in cattle, that is quite common for providing more and better quality of the milk or meat, or even the eggs for that matter, not with the cattle's eggs, but of course the hen or something like that. So these artificial insemination, they are being practiced there. So one of the example, like when you have that farm for the cows, right, or cattle farm, there people identify which cow gives lot of milk, and they look for the male. They analyze for the good semen of the male, and then they inseminate into that particular cow, and then the offspring generated will be of better quality. So and then again the better milk production and so on can happen. So that is one thing. Then the third point is the improvement of the human race. In that studying of the family pedigrees. Pedigrees is nothing but that pedigree chart where we study about which particular organism is not organism, which particular member of the family is the carrier, which particular member of the family is affected or not affected. So all these traits can be studied using the family pedigree chart, and by that it is possible to provide the genetic counseling to persons, like the people in the family, and the possibility of the appearance of defective trait in the children. So again, for example, simplest example is color blindness. If father is color blind, mother is also color blind, most likely the child is going to be color blind. How do we know this? Through the pedigree chart. If we plot that graph, like XY and XC, and both X chromosomes, they are going to be color blind. So then the next generation, whatever may be the case, daughter or son, they will always be the carrier. So that way this will go on. So that is how can we avoid to improve that particular human race, can be thought of by genetic counseling using the family pedigree chart. Then disputed percentage. So the inheritance of blood groups help in solving the disputed percentage of the child. What this literally refers to, like there are so many blood group issues with respect to the compatibility with each other, right? And blood group is genetically determined. So that particular issue can also be sorted based on the if we know the genotype of those two individuals who are producing a child. So usually it is said that certain combinations of the blood, they are not compatible with each other, and the mother usually faces the kind of complication, because then the mother's blood group is something else and the child's blood group is something else, and then the complication arises. We will see that part when we talk of the blood groups with respect to genetics. So we'll study that part there. So these are the 4 points which kind of explain the biological importance of Mendelism or Mendel's laws and his study. Any question here? Okay, so then we will just take this particular part and go over these points, and then we will stop. Now, whenever Mendel did his study, most of the studies they were done with only one particular plant, and there were quite a few deviations in the sense, quite a few things that were observed which were exceptions to the Mendel's experiment. So after the rediscovery of this Mendel's law, the hereditary experiment they were conducted on large number of animals and plants, and not just the Pisum sativum, but different varieties of animals as well as plants. And then the numerous exceptions to the Mendelian ratios were observed. So Mendelian ratio that in the monohybrid cross, genotype ratio was 1:2:1, phenotype ratio was 3:1, 3 being dominant, 1 being recessive, and genotype ratio 1 homozygous dominant as to 2, that is heterozygous, as to 1, that is homozygous recessive. So those ratios they were not maintained in some of the animals and plants, and these were the exceptions. And these exceptions they can be explained by modifying the Mendel's law. Now this modification is actually a part of biology which is called as post-Mendelian genetics, or it is also called as neo-Mendelian genetics. Neo literally refers to kind of modern Mendelian genetics, and this was based on the 2 points, that is interaction between alleles of a gene, that is how those genes or alleles they interact with each other, that is interallelic interaction, or what is also called as intragenic interaction. And secondly, that is the intergenic interaction. So intragenic and intergenic, that is within the gene itself and with the another copy of the same gene itself. So those two interactions they were considered, and based on that this post-Mendelian genetics is established. This intergenic interaction is also called as multiple gene inheritance. Intergenic means between genes, and that is nothing but multiple genes, and that particular inheritance was studied. And then based on these particular like exceptions, there were quite a few phenomena which were described later, that is incomplete dominance, or what is also called as partial dominance. Now what we know of as of now is the complete dominance. So whenever there is both capital letter, let's say for example capital Y represents the yellow seed, then if there are both capital Y, they will lead to yellow seed always. That was the assumption with us so far. But in incomplete dominance, when two alleles or these two of particular pair, they are not either related to as completely dominant or completely recessive. Neither of this situation is true. We will see examples of each of these in detail. So that is incomplete dominance. And or it is also called as partial dominance, because the dominant trait is not completely exhibited. Genes are fine, genotypes are same, but the expression is not complete, and that is why it is incomplete dominance. Then codominance, when both the alleles they are expressing themselves equally, right? Now one phenomena was first that we have seen regularly in Mendel's experiment was complete dominance. Then second was incomplete dominance. Third one is codominance. Codominance as in out of a pair of a gene, we were assuming that only one expresses. Now in codominance, both the alleles of a pair they express themselves equally. Yeah, and that ultimately leads to the expression of only one like means mathematically if you calculate, if one allele express half, other allele express half, that is forming the one complete expression. So that way mathematically it is the same, but in biological phenomena these both alleles they express equally. That phenomena is called as codominant, that is both dominant genes are expressing their characteristics. Then the third one, third deviation from the actual Mendelism or Mendel genetics is multiple factors, or what is also known as the interaction of genes. Now, when more than one pair of genes interact and influence the same character, for example, skin color, and if there are more than one pair of genes which are involved in deciding which skin color or which eye color or which hair type should be, so those different phenomena, they are epistasis, that is inhibition of one particular gene, complementary gene, so they are complementing each other. Then duplication of the gene, that is another phenomenon. Multiple alleles, for one particular character there are multiple alleles, that is multiple genes. And polygenes, which is something similar, but inheritance of quantitative character, that is they can be quantified in terms of their characteristics. So these are the different phenomena, and like I said, we will study each of these in detail. And the last deviation is the pleiotropism. Now, this pleiotropism is nothing but the multiple effects of the same gene, one particular gene showing multiple effects. Yeah, so these are the various phenomena in the deviation from the Mendelism. I guess we will stop here. Next class we will start, that is on Thursday, we'll start with incomplete dominance and so on. Very interesting example, you might have observed this phenomena. So we will see it in the next classes. Yeah, so let me stop here as of now, because we won't be able to finish one topic in one go. So let me just take a break any which ways.